You're listening to Earlville Library District's recorded book club meeting for adults from September 26, 2022, discussing The Push by Ashley Audrain. All readers present have given consent to this recording, and all of their opinions are their own. Though we always endeavor to keep our discussions family-friendly, we cannot guarantee that the content of each book is suitable for all audiences. Viewer or listener discretion is advised. Spoiler alert, this is your official warning that the following discussion may include spoilers. You can attend these meetings in person each month too. Stop by the library to see what we're reading next. Welcome to Book Club.
So I guess first impression, what did you think of it after reading it all?
Well, my first impression when I read the title and they started talking about babies, I thought it was about having a baby. And it was somewhat.
Sure.
But then my last impression was it was about psychopathy.
It was a wild ride. It was definitely a wild ride. I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was very different in the way that it kind of portrayed motherhood. I thought it was a very refreshing take on what motherhood is and how different generations can really impact the next. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was all really good and powerful.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind reading it again to maybe get, a few more nuances of meaning.
Yeah. Well, I just read it, so it was very fresh for me still, but it was a very good book. I thought it was very powerful, and it was very well written. Regardless of the time crunch, I felt like I would have finished it in a day because I just couldn't put it down. Yeah. It was so good and so easy to just kind of breeze through. I wanted to find out what happened. I wanted to get to the end of it and know.
And I think it's neat that it's her first book.
I was amazed.
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed by that. I looked her up after reading it because I kind of went into it totally blind. I didn't know anything about the author, just, the synopsis of what I had heard it was about, and it was intriguing enough as that. And then to find out that it was her first book, I was totally shocked. I did not expect that. It was so well written for being her first book, I think.
Mm-hmm. Although she has written other things in the past, lots of articles and
sure,
that
yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah, I see she's coming out with a new book next year, so I'm really excited to see what that one will be about. Mm-hmm. And if it's anything, like this one, because she's definitely a powerful writer.
Well, what's interesting about this book, too, is I might not have picked it out myself if it hadn't been in the book club.
Yeah.
I might just passed it over because I like mysteries and suspense. And this did have suspense in it, but in a different kind of way. It wasn't a murder mystery or,
Right, yeah, I definitely thought it was more of a psychological suspense sort of mystery. Definitely. And no, that's what I love about book club is you get, to try something that you probably wouldn't pull off the shelf randomly. It's something, maybe totally new to you. But it gives you a better feel of yourself and what type of things you would, maybe potentially like. Definitely gets you involved in genres you might not have picked before.
I know, because I stick with the same old stuff. After a while, you can see the pattern.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to do that. We had somebody who came in and was looking at our new shelf and went to check some things out. She's like, well, will you check and see if I've read these? Because I usually gravitate towards the same thing. And sure enough, 2 out of the 3 books she pulled were ones that she had already read.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny.
Yeah, because you get into a pattern of reading, similar things. So I do like, that we each pick a different book, so that way it does give us a push into something into something we might not usually read.
Yeah, and I can even tell, like, when my bookmark is right in the middle of the book is when it starts getting to the big climax.
Yeah. So what did you think about Violet? What did you think about the little girl?
I liked her at the beginning, and I felt sorry for her because her mom wasn't giving her any attention. But then when she started developing some of her own traits, it scared me.
Yeah.
It scared me that there really are people out there like
absolutely.
that. And we don't know
who
they are. And I kept thinking about all the shootings that we've had in the schools and how those people are probably of the same type of person where they don't have that. I don't know if they don't get the gene for caring about other people. I don't know enough about it,
Yeah.
how it all works, but I thought about that a lot. I thought, well, that's what she's going to grow up to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's scary. It's scary in many ways. I was scared for her to live her life that way, and also for others.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, definitely. So it's really interesting. This book has a lot of similarities with another book called We Need to Talk About Kevin. And that one's a really popular one also. I've never read that book. I watched the movie before I had even realized that it was a book. But in that one, it's somewhat of the same thing. It's through the mother's perspective. And it's her son who she's having the issues with, and very similar to Blythe's husband, Fox. Her husband is like totally oblivious to what's going on and doesn't want to believe it. But spoiler alert, in that book, that is what her son does. He ends up doing a mass murder at the school. And it's just, it's crazy. So that one was really powerful as well. So I saw a lot of comparisons between the two. But it was just so interesting how one went, you know, a very different direction, but also somewhat parallel direction, because I do feel like Violet might not be there yet, but with the way that her actions were unraveling in the book, I definitely think that something could be happening later on without any intervention.
Mm-hmm. So in the Kevin book, was that a true story or was that a novel also?
I believe it was just a novel.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a novel, probably loosely based on, you know, all of the different things that have happened. But yeah, that one was also fiction.
Because interestingly enough, I just finished another book called The Bad Daughter,
Oh, really?
and it was written by Joy Fielding,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the same idea. It wasn't, of course, it was a novel too,
Mm-hmm.
but it was the same idea, and you never suspected this girl
Yeah.
throughout until the very end, and it was just crazy. The things that she could manipulate people into by being this sweet, you know,
Yeah.
cute little girl.
It is really wild that this sort of idea has presented itself in so many different novels, and the different ways that it can be portrayed in those different novels.
Mm-hmm.
Like this one is obviously very different than the one that I had mentioned, and even sounds like the one that you had mentioned, but they all have that same underlying theme. Hello, welcome back, Paige. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So we're just talking about Violet being worst kid ever.
Yeah. Where did that come from? I guess it's genetic.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. So one of the things that I saw when I was looking up online after I'd finished it was kind of, you know, some discussion questions and things of that sort. And one of the big things that people had pushed back on was it Blythe who actually caused Violet to be that way?
Interesting. Did you guys
We didn't
comment?
discuss yet.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'm hesitant to blame her because I feel like, you know, what's the other kid's name? The boy.
Oh.
See, I'm not good with names.
Sam.
Sam.
Sam. She had such a good response to Sam, and I feel like if Violet would have given her something, maybe that would have awoken the same thing in her that Sam did, and she would have connected better. I know, like, while she was having the baby, she had that moment where she was like, no, I don't want this anymore, I can't do this. And she didn't have a great history of family to build a strong family on, but I feel like I personally got done and wanted to blame Violet, not Blythe. What did you guys think?
I'm kind of, well, it's weird because through the entire book, I felt so strongly with Blythe. I felt like I had the feeling that it was definitely Violet, that the whole time I was just with Blythe. But then after, you know, reading some other people's interpretations of the book, I kind of do see it as Violet was an infant when Blythe neglected her.
Oh, that is true.
She was not capable at that point in her infancy of doing anything that would have caused Blythe to react that way, other than being an infant.
With like colic.
Right. She, from what it sounded like, she had colic. She had something that occurs in babies.
Or just was potentially more fussy than Blythe was really ever interested in
Right.
handling. I mean, that's very true. I think like so much of the book, that's like so early in the book that I've forgotten about her like mistakes too, because she made a lot as a first-time mother. Like you can't just leave your baby crying and put some headphones on and
Right.
let him stew. That's
Right, that
not
sounds
grand.
logical, but she had postpartum depression really badly, and I personally don't know what that feels like.
Right.
You know, so I couldn't relate to not caring for this child that she was just neglecting, and yet she had to survive herself too,
Mm.
you know, with the postpartum depression. So we don't know what that feels like unless we've had it.
Yeah, and I don't have any children, so I have zero knowledge of having children or having postpartum depression.
I also think it's interesting though, because even as somebody who has had children, and I didn't experience postpartum depression in that way, but I can very easily see with a lack of support from Fox, her husband,
Mm-hmm.
how she felt that that could be her only away time, because unfortunately it seems like she was really stuck in a corner where she didn't have that release, that time away that any human being, children or not, needs to be able to function. She didn't have that break away from Violet, so I feel like maybe that made her feel like Violet was doing it intentionally to her.
Mm.
Because postpartum depression can kind of warp your mind in that way. It's, you know, similar to any other type of depression. It just hits new mothers more. So I feel like maybe it's really split down the middle. I do feel like it could be potentially not her fault, but her actions could have some way shaped how Violet developed, especially because, and what I thought was like a really sort of offhanded hint was when Violet recalls the way that Blythe rocked her as an infant. And the fact that she had that memory that far back of something that she had done made me wonder if Violet like held on to the fact that she was neglected and somehow remembered that.
Maybe she was like uncharacteristically bright because she kind of developed into that, or like started to present knowing things and skills before other babies her age.
I don't know. I think babies remember long before we give them credit for, because they usually say your memory starts with language. Well, usually you start talking around, 20 months or so. But I seriously can remember, and I'm older, but I can remember standing at my crib and not liking to be wet. And so I was young enough to be in a crib, old enough to stand up, so maybe 15, 16 months maybe, and shaking calling my mom to come and get me. It was morning, every morning. I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
You know, and I can also remember we lived in an area that had lots of big trees, and my mom would take me for walks in what we used to call buggies
Oh yeah.
back then.
Sure.
And so I was lying down, and I can remember, I love trees now as an adult, but I can remember seeing the big trees as we went by from this spot in my little crib while we were taking these long walks. So, I mean, those are very vivid memories that I have. So she might have, she probably did remember that rocking, you know,
Yeah.
and that feeling of not being connected. But Blythe didn't have any support from her mother. You know, we get support from our mothers and aunts and sisters and cousins and
Yeah,
whatever.
she didn't even have any
anybody.
friends
She didn't
that
have
she could
anybody.
walk through this with.
Yeah.
Or a husband, for that matter.
Yeah, she only had comparisons. She only saw other mothers out and assumed they were better off than her and saw them handling things better than she was in her perspective. Like, she didn't actually know because they didn't ever actually share anything real with her. She was just like passing through. She'd seen at the coffee shop or whatever. So that's an unfortunate, what do they say? That phrase, your highlight reel or whatever. You only put forth your best, you know, in front of other people. It doesn't necessarily give a real picture of their struggles, which might be the same as yours. So she was only looking at other people out and about and like getting stuff done.
Yeah. That was another thing that the author had mentioned in an interview that I had watched of her, is how mothers in general are so scrutinized, especially in today's age where we have social media and you're expected in parenting to, put your best face forward. So you only share, the great moments that you're having with your family, and not moments where your child is colicky and not stopping crying for however many hours. So I do feel like that probably mentally really drained her as well, especially with the fact that her mother was so unstable and her way of coping with not being able to deal with a child was to lock her out. So I wonder if that also kind of worked its way into how she handled Violet, just with her lack of connection there. Her mom had locked her out of the house, so she figured leaving her in her bedroom to scream was just a perfectly fine response.
Yeah, not necessarily relatable or good, but potentially a rationale behind her actions. Like, she didn't have support growing up or being a mom from Vox or any other family. Just Vox is like sort of like judgmental family who wanted everything very specific, and perhaps that was comforting to her for a while before the kids, because that was the structure she didn't know, and like a different kind of family that was together and present and made time for each other, which appeared to be great until, things started to go wrong for her and she didn't fit in anymore. She wasn't keeping everything together and fitting in perfectly. I feel like their true colors came out, and Vox just completely disassociated himself with her, which was weird to me, because they had painted such a vivid picture of their good relationship in early marriage and dating and stuff, and they shared each other's interests, and he seemed to be really supportive during that time, and then everything just sort of poofed. As soon as she had the baby, there were a lot of expectations and not a lot of support or concern, or she was always wrong or misinterpreting the situation with Violet. It was always her problem that can only wear on a person. So that didn't improve her situation at all. She couldn't get any better if she didn't have someone to take her seriously, or to say, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And step forward.
That was one of the things that I wrote down as well, is with Fox's actions, it just made me wonder, was his love for her ever actually genuine?
Yeah, I wondered that at times too.
Because he did not only kind of push her to the side and zone in completely on Violet and take everything at face value that came from Violet, he just automatically sided with her. But then for him to move on to this entirely new relationship with Gemma while still being with Blythe was, I don't know, it was crazy to me. I don't believe that you can truly love someone and care for someone like that, suffer this giant loss with them, and then so quickly just toss them to the side and move on. It seemed, I don't know, their relationship was very complicated to me, because like you said, they showed it in this picture perfect light, and then so quickly it crumbled without him even, I feel attempting to really have a come to terms with her. I feel like he did a lot of pushing her off to the side by sending her to these different locations. She did the retreat for her mental health, and he was really good at pushing her to the side, but I don't feel like they ever had their moment where everything surfaced and he actually took a look at it in a different light. I feel like he was just so quick to scrap that. She's not picture perfect mommy like mine was. I'm going to rebuild with somebody completely new. So that just makes me think that he was not genuine.
Yeah, and perhaps a bit arrogant, because he would have to admit then some fault in the situation if he were to have a come to terms moment and be like, okay, let's fix this. He would have to admit some sort of wrong, steps, and he never did that. I don't think he ever agreed that he had done anything wrong or hadn't been helpful. Well, I guess he did say once, right? At the very end when he leaves and on the steps, he said something like, I should have been
more for you. That was
Yeah.
the closest, though, that we came to that. And that even absolutely drove me nuts because he's admitting to her, like, Violet was doing things and I was pushing them to
I
the
was so
side.
mad. Yeah.
And he's laughing throughout it all.
Yeah, well, I thought maybe because I listened to the audiobook, so I thought maybe I misheard. So I rewound the thing because I thought, oh, maybe he's crying because he's like really like finally letting her know that she wasn't crazy, and he feels grief or guilt that he didn't share that with her earlier. No, he was laughing, and then I wondered, is some of him in Violet, and that's why she's like psychopathic, because he was like thinking that that's hilarious when that should have been the clearest proof of a problem with Violet, whether it was caused by Blythe or not. Like, she had an issue that they should have addressed, and clearly you saw it there while she's just like happily sawing apart Mom's clothing, and only Mom's clothes, you know, like, it's very calculated, very concerning, and he thought that was hilarious.
And he covered up for her.
Forever.
Oh, it drove me nuts. And it also made me mad that then Blythe joined in and was also laughing.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
was-
I was like, don't do that.
No, I was so very irritated by her because at that moment, like, you could have, you know, gained control and, like, been
Yeah.
like, what were you doing? You know, what were you thinking? We could have solved this. We could have put her into, you know, some of these programs that you were shoving me into.
Or we could have all gone together, like,
Right.
to seek help as a family, not just like making Mom think she's crazy and incapable and the problem.
Yeah, I think the author did such a good job of pulling those emotions because throughout the entire time I felt so just intertwined with her. I felt like what she was feeling. I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like I was losing control with what she was feeling. It was so rough and I felt for her so much, and then to watch her just kind of laugh it off with her absolutely awful ex-husband, it was frustrating, but I will say that it also showed that she has some of her father in her because she is so very passive, which her father was with her mother when he did not leave, continued to let her run about and do things that she obviously should not have been doing as a married woman in a relationship. But he was so passive. And so I know that throughout the whole book, she's very concerned about being like her mother, but I just see so much of her father in her when she's letting Fox do, you know, whatever, letting him not believe her and just going about it. She even, like, picked up on the fact that he was having an affair, and she just didn't want to hear it. So she kind of, like, let that go under the radar as her father did.
Yeah, I suppose. Maybe she felt like, what were her options? Like, she probably wasn't excited about picking up Violet and going having a life together. Like, she was scared of her for a lot of the time. So that probably wasn't an option. And then to leave them would have taken a lot of independence that she didn't have, because, I mean, I didn't really consider that, but I agree that she probably was more like her dad. Perhaps seeing her mom made her more like her dad. Maybe somewhere subconsciously she knew she didn't want to do those things, so she just really leaned into her dad's personality.
That's very probable. I identified with her in the fact that she wasn't heard. That she kept trying to explain the situation about the push, and nobody would understand it. They just saw this beautiful little girl, and how could you possibly think there's anything wrong with her? And nobody listened to her, you know, so she wasn't heard. I guess, at least in my generation, women, you know, were kind of pushed to the side a little bit, not always heard, you know, and not always acknowledged for what we know or what we can do.
No, I think that's a great
good
point.
yeah.
The author herself also said that, especially parenting and motherhood, we've advanced so far in so many different things, and our expectations and our boundaries and all of those things as time has grown on has evolved. But motherhood is one thing that has not changed much. There are still such high expectations of motherhood and mothers and how you're supposed to act and how you're supposed to present yourself and how you're not supposed to suffer from things like postpartum depression, and you're supposed to embrace motherhood. And there is just such a high expectation. that people who have these different experiences are pushed to the side and not believed, because people just don't want to think that that's a thing. People want to assume that having a child is supposed to be a blessing. People don't understand the struggle that comes with that. And I feel like although we have, moved forward in so many places, that is definitely one that could use some improvement. Just the expectations on parents in general. It's a lot. It is quite a lot.
It is a lot.
It's interesting because at the same time we're so open now to believing in like mental health and its importance and various conditions or struggles, but it seems to, like, being a mom and postpartum depression does seem to be one of those things that you're still not really allowed to have. You can have other forms of depression and you can have, other struggles, but that one is still like not okay. I could see that. I'm not a mom or anything, but like I can appreciate that. Like I recognize that that's not really accepted, and that's interesting.
I think the very good thing about the book is that somebody who is a reader, who maybe is not a parent, she describes the struggles and things that she was going through so well that I feel like you don't need to have that experience to understand the heartbreak that she's going through. I am, so maybe I don't, have the best understanding of it, but I just felt like with the writing and how in-depth she portrayed things, like you could read the book without being a parent and still be as affected as somebody who was.
I agree because I don't have kids, and I felt that too. While I was reading the first bit that was really her struggles in like very early motherhood, I was like, oh, well, this is really informational for me because like I don't have this. I can't even say I had like a good pregnancy. So like this is the opposite of what I experienced. I don't have any experience. And I think I agree that it made me go, oh, this must be what moms feel like. And I think she did a good job of describing it so that I did feel what she felt. And I didn't have to have that experience to tug on. I could be like, this makes sense that she would feel this way, and I can not relate, but like just appreciate the struggles that other moms with that depression are like going through. I feel like it did. I mean, I'm the only one who can say so, but I think that's true.
Yeah, she is very good at explaining, because I mean, even in a normal pregnancy, in a normal birth, you're exhausted.
I can only imagine.
You're just so tired. The baby's not sleeping for a while, and even, I mean, we had one that didn't sleep all night till he was 3 years old.
Oh.
And so, you're up all the time, and you're tired all the time, and so even in that situation, in a healthy, it's just a lot with this postpartum depression that she had, and with the background that she had to bring into the pregnancy and the birth. She, had 2 strikes against her to begin with, and I could understand, like you were saying, I could feel for her at the beginning, not getting any sleep. That was a big thing for me. It's like, I need some rest.
Yeah. That can only wear on a person. You can only go sleep deprived and function for so long.
Yeah, and that's for any person, let alone somebody who's meant to be in charge of upholding, the life of this other little person, which she mentions, multiple times, that she's just trying to get Violet through the day. She's just trying to keep Violet alive, because at that time, being so just emotionally drained, mentally drained, everything, that's not an unrealistic expectation. Sometimes you really can just get the little person to the end of the day. So I feel for her, especially with her lack of support. One of the things that really stuck out to me was Fox's mom, when she had hired the night nurse for her. After her 2 weeks was up, she had told Blythe, okay, it's been a month now, you need to get back at it. And that was just another push in these unrealistic expectations. There is no amount of time that is going to, 1, prepare you for motherhood, and 2, you don't magically just bounce right back into being the person that you were before. Anybody who is experiencing, that big of a lack of sleep is going to mess with your emotions for sure. So the fact that everybody around her just expected, all right, your time is up. You gotta roll out of this. was frustrating for sure. I did feel really strongly for her. It was rough. It was definitely rough for her.
Yeah, it was just rough. I didn't enjoy the book so much like the first half because it just felt so depressing and everything was just so bad and awful. Her family life was bad. Her marriage, which you thought was like starting out well, went downhill as soon as she had the baby. And I was just getting like, okay, we're just trudging through bad after bad after bad. And that's not how I want to spend my Saturday afternoon. But it did, I guess, like, it sounds like it got happier, but it got a little more interesting as Violet aged and was weirdly calculative about things. And it took on like a weird psychological turn. I thought that was more interesting to read because I was less concerned with the sadness and more interested in like, oh my gosh, what's going to be next after. I think I suspected eventually. I'm usually like way behind and I don't see things coming. But I eventually suspected that Violet was going to push Sam, and I thought that might be where the title came from. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, we're not far enough in the book yet for this to be what the book is about. So like, what else is going to happen that's going to be crazy? So it did propel me along, and it got better in the fact that like I wasn't just sunken in sadness. It was like, okay, what is she going to come out of it? Is someone going to find out, prove Violet did it? Or, you know, is there be some other, is she going to keep hurting people? Like, I needed to know how she was going to grow up. So it made me keep reading. So I did appreciate that. I didn't finish the book just depressed. Definitely disturbed. But I wasn't just sad. So I appreciate that. I think she did an excellent job of writing it because I never felt like it was slow or that I didn't know what was going on. It was very well paced. But so glad it didn't just end. It did, I mean, it was sad, but
I think it was also just very disturbing.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
one of the underlying, themes that I got was just that it was very disturbing. Even more so when you realize, like, it is pretty much all speculation.
Yeah.
We are getting the story just told from Blythe. Like, we don't know, the other ins and outs. We see everything from her perspective. I do feel like Violet was what she had said that she was. I do think that there was something off with her, just with the different ways that things were, working themselves out. But another argument was that because we are only seeing things through her perspective, is it possible like she shaped it this way? And when, we get to the end of the book and we get that Gemma call, do we really think that it's Violet that did it because Violet's evil, or is it just because of everything that Blythe has worked up this entire time?
And now has planted the seed for Gemma to think that.
Right.
Or for us too, the reader.
Right. So is Gemma, because she has this prior knowledge to Sam, and I mean, if you think about it, really that's all that Gemma has is the Sam situation. If Blythe were to have told her everything else, all of the other little situations, all of the classmates and the little boy on the slide, I think it was, would that be solidifying that? We don't really know, because how many of those experiences were exactly as Blythe had set them out to be?
And if Blythe wasn't necessarily mentally stable 100% when she was experiencing these situations, did she also recount them correctly? Or was she so intent on Violet being evil that she saw what she wanted to see? That is an interesting point.
That's a good question. And too, I think the reader puts their own perspective into that, because
Absolutely.
I felt the whole time like Blythe was right. She knew what this kid was capable of.
Yeah.
And she tried to warn everybody, but they wouldn't listen. And so I was, this sounds terrible, but at the end, when Gemma called her, I thought, oh, good. Now.
No, I did. I thought the same thing. I was so nervous that it was going to be open-ended, that she was going to leave it as you can decide, is Violet evil or is she crazy? And she wasn't going to give us that solid ending. And so thankfully when I read that Gemma called her and something had happened, although, you know, I felt sad for little Jet,
Right.
I was like, I thought the same thing. Good. Somebody please,
Yeah,
you know,
vindicated.
listen to her. It's sad that all of this has had to happen for somebody to listen to her. Although she was a little off. Blythe was a little off.
Absolutely.
With her, some of her decision making was just so poor. In particular, I just think about the way she weaseled her way into these different support groups.
Oh yeah.
One with the like mothers of convicts or felons or something along those lines that she had no business being in. But then again, when she basically stalks Gemma into her parenting group.
Yeah, and awkwardly, secretly befriends her. Yeah, she had lost it.
Yes,
in my
absolutely.
opinion, at that point, and had really taken way too much pleasure in pretending that Sam was alive and at home, and she was getting to share stories. Like, I get that that's all part of the issue, but like, she needed real help right then. She had fallen off the rocker.
Yeah.
But she also needed a friend, and she
Absolutely.
was looking, you know, in all these bizarre places just to connect
Sure.
with somebody. And I know, you know, her relationship with her husband was what drove her to seek out Gemma. See what is so attractive about her that is not attractive about me, blah, blah, blah. You know, I know that, but at the same time, she needed that group of women.
I agree, but they never could be for her what
Right.
she needed,
Right.
because she wasn't herself, and she needed both things. I think she needed support of someone real in her life, and then help. And she could have, you know, made real friends, and it would have been okay. But she kept making these fabricated relationships, and that wasn't helping her at all.
But the sad thing too is, like you said, she had this good relationship with her husband.
Yeah, that's
You know, when
true.
they were courting and getting married, and then she lost that, so she did have a feeling of what that was like.
That's true.
You know.
Or maybe she counted that as a fake relationship because it had fallen apart, so she couldn't separate the real beginning from the end. It was all one bad relationship, and new good relationships are going to end up the same way. I have no idea what was going through her head, her poor, frustrated, tormented head.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of emotion in there, a lot of different things going on. I think it did a very good job of showing just how generations of parenting can shape a person.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because they were all, it was like 3 generations of rough goes. Just making more rough goes.
Yeah.
I also wonder what Fox's relationship with Gemma was really like, because we only know Gemma and like her pretty rosy impression of everything. I want to know if Fox treated Gemma the same way he treated Blythe, and it just went over differently. Like, was he also like, you handle it, I'm not really going to support you, I don't really care what your life is like, I don't care if you have any dreams and you want to pursue anything, it's all about this baby now, and Violet, as long as you take care of them and they're doing good, I'm okay. Like, did he also do that to her?
I don't know, because the only glimpse you get into their relationships at the very beginning, when Blythe is looking through the window and they're decorating the house for Christmas, and you see that they're a loving family.
Right.
And it seems to me, was she pregnant at that time?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was
With
actually a
another
little
baby.
confused about.
Yeah.
That made me a little bit confused because of where it fit in the storyline.
Yeah, I
me
never
too.
worked it out to figure out where it was supposed to be.
I'm a little lost at that as well, because at the end we get the phone call of, you know, Gemma calling her and saying something happened, but where does that phone call fit into the timeline of the Christmas gathering? Because at that point she was supposed to be giving Fox this notebook or pile of papers that explained that's what the whole story was, her telling of this.
Oh.
Oh, that's right. She said, this is my side of the story.
Right. And I never really gathered where that fit in the timeline and if that delivery ever happened. It made it seem like it did not, I think she was maybe scared off by Violet when the blinds closing.
Oh yeah.
And that really unsettled me. I will
Yeah.
say the imagery I got of Violet in the window with her veil just like breaking and her acting as she is on the inside, I just got the worst image of her being this scary child in the window.
Demon child.
Yeah, this just, the evil look on her face and
Yeah.
saying, I pushed him. I could not shake that. I think she did a really good job of describing that. And so I wonder if that's why maybe this transcript of everything that she went through wasn't delivered. But I guess we never really know.
Yeah, I guess I assumed she was so shaken that she didn't go through with it. Like she wasn't going to disturb them, or obviously she didn't probably want to talk to Violet at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Yeah, I kind of lost sight of that too, that she had her side.
Another thing that was confusing, and at the very, very beginning when they give that like little page about how the eggs are formed when you're still
Oh, yeah.
in your mom's womb.
Mm-hmm.
I never really believed that. I always thought the eggs were formed between 13 and 21
Oh.
of a person. So you have some control about your diet and, however you're taking care of yourself. It seemed almost like you're completely out of control of what your future is going to be, what this baby's health is going to be like. Not that teenagers really care about what they eat, but you know what I mean? It just seems so bizarre
Yeah,
it does
to me.
play
I don't know if
to-
that's true.
Yeah,
or
I'm
not.
afraid I don't either, but it makes an interesting statement about her lack of control for her situation.
Right.
But
Like it was
yeah.
already predetermined what
Yeah.
this kid was going to be like.
But I don't actually know.
Yeah.
We need a science lesson really quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Just had so many notes. It's such a good book. We covered a lot of them, thankfully, but I do think I would have liked more of Fox's perspective.
I think it was necessary though that we didn't have it. She
It's
accomplished
true.
what she did because we didn't know so much.
It's true, and I feel like also that's why you do get, such a sense of like you could choose what path you wanted to go down. You could believe Violet or you could believe her. But it just does irk me because I want to know like what is the truth.
Yeah, I also want to know what happens now for Gemma and Jet. Like, what's going on in their family now? Are they all suspicious of Violet? Does anyone have any idea? Is it just Gemma? Is that going to go anywhere? What did she do? Is he dead? Is he hurt? Is he lost? Like, I did want more than that. It was enough. It's fine. I'm not, like, upset at the ending. But, like, I am curious. Like, how far does this go? And how many, like, is Fox staying monogamous in this relationship? He's already created a separate, better family. What's going to stop him from looking for an even better next family? I'm just like, how many tricky things are going on here?
I think the difference with Gemma is that her and Violet bonded. I feel like that kind of solidified his connection with her because they did not have that strained relationship that her and Blythe had. Because she just took to her. And I don't know, I almost think that she was using Gemma as a pawn against her mom because
I agree.
she made digs at her knowingly by calling her mom and by making comments to her. So I feel like their relationship is probably great right now, but it will deteriorate, especially if something, does happen to Jet and Gemma is forced to re-examine Violet the way that Blythe did, because I feel like since that was such a fake relationship, Violet building this fake relationship with Gemma, it's surely doomed. There's no way, especially if something were to happen to the child, that could,
It feels like a loose cannon. Like, if not this, it would be something else that would break that relationship and it would all start to crumble. Because I don't think Violet, because like I was on the Blythe side. So like, I don't think Violet has any true interest in their relationship. She's not like glad she has Gemma. She's just using her as a pawn. So like to her, as long as it's working for her, they're great. But as soon as she wants something different, like she'll just decide, I don't want you here anymore, and she'll get rid of you.
Yeah. Which is so curious. I would love to get some sort of insight behind, what is going on in her mind. She's such a little person, so what is causing these big emotions for you to just randomly out of nowhere say that you no longer want your little brother? And that was one of the things that also frustrated me is she should have been mentioning these offhanded comments to Fox as well, because there was so much foreshadowing there with her saying that she doesn't want her little brother, with her asking about the stoplights, with her asking about bleach, which could have come in later on with Jet. There's just so much that she should have been pushing for to Fox and saying, if you don't want to believe that this happened, okay, but here are these, hints. Maybe addressing them when they happen rather than after the fact would have changed something.
Hard to know.
It is, yeah.
If Fox would have gotten more frustrated more quickly if she had continued to bring it up, and he continued to not put any stock in it, would she just continue to have been thrown aside, pushed off to another retreat to work herself out, where she's just constantly talking about her kid who's crazy, and everyone's like, well, I guess that can't be true.
Yeah.
Yep, we don't know.
We don't know, and she's always going to have that personality unless something comes in and changes it. And I don't know, you can't change the person's personality at all. You can modify it with good counseling and that type of thing, but she's always going to have that, the feeling of non-feeling. Like, I don't care if this kid dies. And it's so hard to understand for me.
Yeah.
How can you not care about what another person?
Because maybe if she had put in all the time and raised Violet to the best of her ability, and Violet still turned out to be a psychopath, it would be more reasonable. But the fact that Blythe clearly contributed to neglect, and whether or not that was her fault or she could have used some help, still was a contribution. So we can't really know who's at fault, because at some point in Violet's life, it's going to be her responsibility to take her own actions.
But
seriously.
at what point? I mean, she's just a child
Yeah.
here. And you wait till she's a mass murderer,
Right?
and then it gets attention, and then she's arrested or killed. And so many, like we were talking before you came, and Lacey was saying she read another book about Kevin.
Yeah, we need to talk about Kevin.
Yeah.
I've heard about
similar.
that.
Mhm.
I've never read it.
And it was the same thing, although he did grow up to be a person who shot up the school. It's a novel too, so it didn't really happen, but look at how many
But
we've
who's to
had
say
in
it
real life.
hasn't?
Right.
Yeah.
Which was my point, is this is not the first of this kind of novel.
Sure.
It's the one that I picked, but there are, multiple of this idea. A lot of which I'm sure are loosely based off of things that have actually occurred.
I think so.
But it's interesting when you say we don't really know who's at fault, because in the book, I think that's exactly what it portrays. There are so many different generations of faults, of this happened because of this happened because of this. You can't really draw a line to say whose fault it is, because it's just a trickle effect starting, way, 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 way back. Just all of these different unfortunate...
I was going to say, if you will, a series of unfortunate events.
Yeah, it's no kidding, a series of unfortunate parenthood faults.
Yeah.
Which is either a positive omen or a negative one, because you can think of it as oh, it just trickles down, and you can't control everything, so do your best and whatever. Or you can think holy moly, this is so hard to influence and so based on things I can't ever know about or have any say in, and just feel like you have absolutely no control, and what's the point of anything?
Oh, I don't like that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's this book
Yeah.
feels like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like that's exactly what she felt like. Because even when she made her little efforts trying to tell people, nobody listened. She
Yeah.
couldn't control anything. Nobody was stopping what was going on. So, yeah, I mean, and that's, so much of what parenting is. You're at a loss of control. You can't control everything. And even if you are, like you said, to be perfect parent and do your best, who that person becomes is only so much of you, you know?
Yeah, that's also a good viewpoint, I suppose. You do the best you can, and then you gotta let them go.
Unfortunately, Violet needs a lot more. Violet needs,
Yes, she does.
Yeah.
Violet needs some intervention ASAP.
Yes, and obviously not all to her fault. There was a lot of bad things that culminated in who she is. But they gotta nip that in the bud before it's too late. And I think that's not gonna happen. She's a nut job, and she's gonna continue down this path.
Yeah.
Who's to stop? Vox isn't gonna see that anything is wrong. He hasn't this far. I just don't know, I don't have faith in him to put two and two together, to go, oh, this thing happened, the same thing happened again, we'll say Jet dies, and Violet's suspected. I don't feel like I have faith in him to put two and two together and investigate, even if he doesn't want to, because obviously you don't want to think that your child is capable of these things, but even to like take a step towards like maybe observing her a little more acutely or whatever. I don't think he would do that.
No, I think what he'll likely do is blame Gemma on having contact with Blythe. I think he'll, do the whole, well, she corrupted you. She made you think these things about her.
And then
you
it's
know,
all
you have
Blythe's
these
fault again.
notions about her. So
Yeah.
I can definitely see that happening with the way that he was acting. Yeah, it was very unfortunate to see how he was, and it was almost confusing because I don't understand where he got off. I don't understand why his loyalty lied so heavily in Violet and not his wife who he had built this relationship with prior to her existence.
Because had they been together like 10 years before they had the
Yeah.
kid, that's a long time to know someone pretty intimately. To all of a sudden, boom, you're completely delusional, and that is a weird bridge to jump.
He was an odd character.
So I got a different opinion at the end. I felt like Gemma would realize at this point whatever happened to her son. Hopefully he wasn't killed, but something bad happened to him. That she would realize that Blythe was her friend, and she was, well, maybe not her friend, but her acquaintance, and she was telling the truth, and we have to do something. And I felt like Gemma would take the reins in and say, look, we've got to take care of it. We've got to do something about this child and get her help somewhere along the line, whatever that help may be.
That would be like best case scenario.
That would, wouldn't it? I'm
Yeah.
the eternal optimist.
That's great. Yeah, I want to believe that happens, and she
Yeah.
turns into a lovely little child, and they
Right.
live happily ever after.
Upstanding citizen, yes, that would be great.
No more highway baby buggy incidents.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
gosh, that was so scary.
It was. It
Like
was.
just the coffee in the face alone,
Yes.
was
Yeah.
scary. So how did you choose this book?
It was really curious. I just typically look up some different books that I've seen trending or that I get ideas from, and I saw this one, and I saw it was on the book club list for Good Morning America, and I saw the ties between this and We Need to Talk About Kevin, so I thought it was worth a shot. Yeah.
But she did a great job of storytelling.
Oh, she
And
absolutely did.
That's what she was supposed to do.
Yeah,
so.
she
Great
absolutely
first
did.
novel.
I thought so as well. It was very heavy and very sad at times, but I'm very glad that I read it. It was so good. Out of 5 stars, what do you think?
Well, I rated it on Goodreads 3
Okay.
because I don't like depressing things, but it was really well written.
Yeah.
So I liked it, but I didn't like it.
Sure.
I gave 3.
I give it a 4. Same thing. I really loved the story. It moved along quickly. It kept my interest, but I didn't like the subject matter. It was scary to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it was terrifying.
I gave it like a 5. Yeah, I
5
did.
out of 5.
I did. I really liked it. I was kind of in like a middle of a 4.5 to 5. Because one thing that I didn't mention was there was some very interesting times where Blythe got very odd with her descriptions. I recall her mentioning eating or putting the baby's
Fingers?
in her mouth.
That's true. That was disconcerting.
Some of those descriptive things that she added in there were very odd, and I felt a bit out of place.
Oh.
I don't know, they seemed very weird. So I was a little bit thrown off by some of that stuff. But I really loved it. It was depressing, which was not the greatest. It definitely affected my real life mood.
Just a second.
But I did think it was really great. It was such a good story. I feel like she did a good job of invoking different emotions in you and, playing out a story that you didn't want to put down. So I really liked it.
See, a 3 is like a big deal for me, because I rarely give anything a 4, let alone a 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, I'm just very picky.
I'm really glad that you enjoyed it, even without any parenting experience.
Yeah.
Because that was something that was, really debated in the reviews. And when I read it, I thought, this is a book that I would enjoy without the parenting experience. Because obviously her experience in parenting is very different than, what you would imagine like the normal parenting experience to be.
And it perhaps is the message.
Correct. So I don't feel like you need any sort of experience to feel what she was feeling. And I feel like that makes you a great storyteller. If you can make somebody feel those sort of emotions, then you did a good job,
Yeah, I agree. Which is why I say I liked it, but I didn't like it.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. It's definitely not everybody's cup of tea. It is a depressing pot of coffee.
And everybody does not get postpartum depression.
Right.
So don't let that scare you.
Absolutely. I was also glad it wasn't any longer than it is. This was a relatively quick read, so for the heft of the content, it was, in and out.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal. I wasn't dreading reading it, which I have done before.
Yeah.
It was a rough subject, but yeah, it was easy to read.
Also, props to her for giving an actual ending. I do feel like, as you said, you want to know more, but it's a good stopping point because you can, imagine more and such. But she did actually give you an ending. It wasn't so open that you don't feel like you got a real answer.
So open or so out of left field, so hurriedly shut, which is, I feel like, such a problem. Either they don't tell you anything or they tell you everything in 3 pages.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating also. No, I thought it was, like you said, she's a great storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
She could tell any story, I feel like, well. This one just happens to be sad.
Yes. She does have another one coming out, I mentioned, next year, so I'm excited to see what she does with that.
Is it unrelated?
Yeah, I believe it's unrelated. This is her first ever book.
Wow.
Yeah, which we were both really
Good for
impressed
her.
with.
Amazing.
She is a very good writer, especially for that being, your debut novel.
Yeah.
It was a really good piece of work. So, yeah, I look forward to see what else she comes out with.
I hope it's not as terrifying.
Yeah. Oh, man, that image of her in the window at Christmas, that was going to stick with me. That was spooky.
I think I took for granted how well she drew the pictures of what was happening in my head until you mentioned it. Because, I remember seeing all of those scenes very clearly, whether it was her mom, cutting herself and smearing blood all over herself, or Violet at the window at the very end. I saw all those things, but I think I took for granted how clearly she painted those pictures. That was her.
Yeah.
She wrote it so that it was very vivid.
Mm-hmm. And unsettling. Very unsettling.
Like it was supposed to be.
Yeah, she did a great job.
Thank you for listening to this month's recorded book club meeting discussing The Push by Ashley Audrain. If you're interested in participating in one of these discussions, stop by the library to see what we're reading next. Happy reading!